this whole journey of the past 2 years, especially with everything that's going on, like you said, completely fucked up with everything that's been going on in the world, states, the whole world. The way I was introduced to you was it was 2021, and it was right after January 6th. I was banned on TikTok because I was a big, TikTok contributor, making my own content, had about 30,000 followers. And I was banned on TikTok the same day that, Trump was removed from Twitter. And then somebody sent me a link to a video with Simon Parks, Charlie Ward, and I think it was a few other people. And then eventually I saw you on one of their videos, and I was like, who's this weird dude? You have a very distinct way of talking, and I was like, but the one thing that I've learned in the past 2 years that has continued to grow is this is way more of a spiritual thing that's going on in our world than just a truth thing or just a fact thing. And that's one of the things that I picked up from you specifically was I'm like, this guy's not necessarily, like a Christian upbringing that like I had. My dad was a pastor, and he still is. He's a pastor here in Minnesota, runs a church. But I'm like, this is a spiritual mind. This is a spiritual guy. He's recognizing what's going on. And this, I feel like as a Christian, a lot of Christians I feel like have felt like they almost have a monopoly on spirituality. And throughout this process, I've really learned, I'm like, spirituality is much bigger than that. Spirituality is, and there's a lot of Christians that are missing and are not awake right now. And they're missing, kind of like the train, the truck for what's going on currently. And this is kind of like one of the themes that I felt like I'm like, this would be an interesting topic to talk to Sacha about, because I feel like you probably have a lot to say on this subject. So that's kind of what I've been wanting to talk to you about. And that's what was kind of like the whole reason of me trying to set this up was I was like, what are your thoughts on this whole topic and the spirituality behind everything that's going on right now?
We can speak in terms of spirituality, or we can speak in terms of witchery and black magic, bedevilment, ritual Satanism, and all of that, because it all plays, in a sense, into the subtle realms. So the subdimensional and hyperdimensional aspects of our reality, that the parts we don't see but we sense, for good or for ill, angelic, demonic. That's what we're speaking about here. So again, we can only speak about spirituality when we also take into consideration the subdimensional element, which is the demonic aspect of it. And we have to then weigh reality as we see it, how best to form an appraisal of reality and maintain one's sanity. That becomes a pretty important question, especially at a time like now where the entire planet is going through a psycho-civilizational meltdown, economically, socially, politically, culturally, in every way, shape, or form. And of course, it's doing so precisely because the satanic or Babylonian elements of our society have held dominion for a long period of time. And that period of time has reached a threshold event where government and the Catholic Church and all of the infrastructure of the monotheistic religions actually have all morphed into more or less the same thing. They are what I refer to as the parent corporation. They serve themselves. They are an inward-looking ecosystem which seeks to harvest humanity through usury, manipulation, dream spell, and maintain its own satanic or Luciferian thrall over humanity. So that's what we've arrived at patently, and if you can't see it, you're brain dead. So, that's my takeaway to people today, 2022. If you don't get it, it's probably too late for you. You should just shuffle off and, with your prayer beads. But you're really beyond help if you can't see the wheat from the chaff now. This is the year of bifurcation, of the separating of the wheat from the chaff. It's written into the numbers 2022. In point of fact, if you look at last week or the week before, the 21st of June being the summer solstice, the central point of this year in terms of central sun, we've moved over that point now. So we're right now in the emergent dawn, so to speak, of the reckoning, the revelation, should I say. The reckoning is upon us. COVID is symptomatic and totemistic of the Great Tribulation, the reckoning. And the revelation now is upon us. And we had better be braced for what is coming, because what is coming is in many ways beyond imagining. Certainly for those blessed fools who continue to believe that government serves citizens, or that banks take care of your money, or that hospitals will make you well and send you home glowing and pink. No, the opposite is now transpired. The health and medical industry is a ritual sacrificial harvest technology that by best accounts pumps synthetic molecules into the arms of billions of souls in order to poison them into slow death, because that is where the profit is. So we've reached this Babylonian threshold event anyway, where spiritualizing our sense of purpose and direction and orientation is integral to survival. Because if we fail now to alchemize our lives into a spiritual path, or I don't like to use the word path, but a spiritual orientation, then frankly, we're fucked, because there is no redemption. There is other than the one we offer ourselves in this. So to stand in the light of Christ and to stand under the jurisdiction of the one true God calls and summons everything that makes us up, what we are, what we be. You are being held and called to judgment now. Right now, judgment is upon us. It's not happening over the vista. It's not going to happen someday in some apocryphal biblical story complex that's whizzing around in your head. It's happening right here, right now. Apocalypse, Armageddon, reckoning, tribulation, revelation. It's all happening now. The question, of course, becomes who, what, or where is the Redeemer? The salvation. Well, that comes with the absolution, but you are the point of witness. And this was the message of Jesus the Master. In point of fact, Chris, it was the message of Lord Gautama Buddha. It was the message also of Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, if one understands the true mystical tradition of Islam. So the monotheistic religions in that sense are all very much the same pure, true form of spiritual doctrine, but they've been couched, commandeered, perverted by priesthoods, which is to say bankers. All priests in that sense are bankers. Bankers are priests. They stand between us and our capacity to prosper, to flourish, to explore, to expand, consciously and otherwise. So priest bankers are the problem, have always been the problem. I give you Council of Nicaea, 328, 325 AD. That was the weaponization of the message of Yeshua, the Master Jesus. And subsequent to that, we've seen just these battalions of centurions of Rome, with their phalanxes of soldiers marching in straight lines across the surface of the earth, conquesting and commandeering all that is real and natural and under God's law, and sequestering it into boxes and systems-based thinking and units of measurement and time and motion and profit and racket. And that's what we've arrived at today, at this Babylonian edifice where there's nothing sacred in the apparatus, the infrastructure of our so-called reality. So you and I are forced now into spiritualizing, or we perish.
Yeah, and it's funny that you said the sifting part, because there's a lot of verses. Like I said, I grew up in the church, and there's a lot of verses in the Bible that have really started to make sense in this past 2 years. Jesus talks about the sifting of wheat, and then there's a verse of, he's like, my sheep hear my voice, and those two things connected. That's what I feel like has been happening in these past 2 years. And like I said, it's not just a Christian thing; it's a spiritual thing. But it's like what's happening is it feels like there's a sifting of people who can recognize truth, actual truth, but spiritual truth as well. Something that resonates with your heart, resonates with what feels true, what feels to be true. And it's like, and I think anybody could agree that the truth has been one of the biggest violations in the past 2 years, and it just continues to be violated. Simple, basic truth, like what is a woman, that kind of things, and it's so obvious. And so, but like when it comes down to it, what's happening is I feel like we're seeing the sifting, and then we're seeing the sifting of people who are able to hear his voice, hear basic truth, listen. And it's like you mentioned, the vaccines, people are kind of different on this one, but I'm like, whatever's going on with this COVID-19 vaccine, it doesn't feel right to a lot of us. I don't know how deep and how crazy it's going to be for our future, but there is something that a lot of us have felt that has been spiritually connected to the truth of what's going on with these vaccines.
Yeah.
But like I said, it seems like there's just such a dramatic sifting of people being able to recognize what is true. And what do you think is at the heel of that? What do you think is the biggest thing that, keeps people from seeing that?
It is the horror of stepping into the now. That is the thing that causes most people to filter reality and to take a left fork in the road. And in this case, to roll up their sleeves and welcome the mark of the beast, because that's what we're dealing with here. So let me ask a pedestrian question of the average Christian. How the devil did you imagine that the mark of the beast was going to unfold? Do you think we were going to read it in the newspaper? Come on, people.
See this is a question I had with my dad. Like I said, he's a pastor. I'm like, and I was trying to, just reason with him, and I asked him, I was like, so let's say this vaccine is not the mark of the beast, which, whatever.
Which it is.
Yeah, which I'm like, but I asked him, I was like, doesn't it make sense, like from what we're seeing, how it's playing out in real world today, keeping people from eating, keeping people from shopping, living in whatever. I was like, doesn't it make sense how it would be something like this? And he said no. And I was like, oh, like, how do you not see it?
Well, that's a matter for your father, of course, but one sympathizes with the that's why I said pedestrian. Mm-hmm. Let me ask a pedestrian question of the average Christian, because the average Christian is a pedestrian thinker. Unfortunately, generally have mistaken their understanding of what it is to be meek, and instead of become weak. And that is not what meekness is. Meekness of heart is the absence of hubris. Meekness of heart is humility, to be humble enough to be able to quieten one's own ego and egoic voice, sufficient to be able to hear God's law speak to you through natural law, speak to you through man's law. And the fact of the matter is that having synthetic molecules pumped into your babies is as satanic as it could possibly get. And if you were standing in your Christed light, you would know that. Beyond any measure, you would know that you simply do not take the knee to Caesar when it comes to things like health sovereignty. You just don't do it. And you certainly don't offer your babes up to Moloch, which is precisely what this ritual sacrificial event is about. People being cajoled, bullied, coerced, dream spelled into offering their babes up for sacrifice and offering themselves up for sacrifice. That is the ritual sacrifice of innocence, incidentally. It's not that somebody comes and harvests us. Somebody dream spells us into us offering ourselves up for sacrifice. That is the horror of the true story that we're witnessing. Of course, most people, emphasis mothers and fathers, parents, do not want to own that piece, do not want to take ownership of the fact that they have already offered themselves and their babes up to Moloch. What a ghastly, gruesome thought. They would rather continue to think very shallowly, not penetrate the depths of their own genius, their own intuition, their own imagination, and believe in the false light narrative, which is the Luciferian narrative, which is the government narrative. Government meaning control meant a mind, control of the mind. Government means mind control to those who know. So stepping away from that, from the status quo, from mainstream media, academia, social media, all of the deceptions and the lies of the great age of the deception, this great Maya, this field of illusion, stepping away from that is the right action into pure truth. That is where the Christed light exists within each of us. And those of us who have the courage, the boldness to be able to step into that flame, even if we have fucked up to this point, we can still redeem ourselves and our kin. But we must take real courage now to do it and to live, embody, and enact that truth and that right action. And to those of us who can still do that now, we are absolutely blessed, so blessed, because we now inherit the earth. We are the ones who move into that new dawn. And alas, the others do not, cannot, and will not. They will perish. There is a bifurcation event underway. It is already done in the greatest sense. And I suspect Dr. David Martin, my compadre's figures may be even lower than I expect, which is he's anticipating 700, 800 million deaths between now and 2028. I suspect it'd be a great deal more than that. But one is certainly looking at a monstrous genocide of humanity, which will come through this Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Sinovac, Johnson & Johnson horror story, which is, again, represents the priest banker. Governments and money, pharmaceutical industries have become the tip of the spear of the harvest of humanity. But that was always the design. If anyone chooses to study the Jesuit oath, you would know that, going back some centuries.
Yeah. I keep on seeing even families on, social media, like boasting that they're getting their children vaccinated. And it just pierces my heart seeing it, it makes me angry. And it just, like, even just from a logical standpoint, it's like, how are you able to not even recognize that's probably not a good idea, just in general, off of an experimental drug? And people are doing it because it's not because it's the right thing to do. It's the woke thing to do. And it's painful to see it. And, I've had my thoughts on the whole vaccine, like, the entire time. My whole family's gotten vaccinated except for one of my brothers. And him and I have been on the same page this entire time about this thing. And it does pain me to just see this entire process go down without people having a second thought about it. And I really do believe that it's a lot more dramatic than people think it is. I think there's, like you said, we don't know what's going to happen, but I know it's not going to be good. And, so you really do. So deep down, do you think this is really one of those end time things?
No, not one of those. This is the end time. This is the biggest end time. It doesn't get worse than this. I mean, snipping the mitochondria of billions of humans through massive treasonous and satanic interventionism by the greatest apparatus of a civilization, which is government, the parent corporation, the central banks, and all of the governments and their weaponized military and police infrastructures enforcing and justice systems, the judiciaries enforcing this treason, this genocide. It is epochal. It is so beyond the scope of imagining of a few short years ago. Of course, one wondered, those of us who knew that the bogeyman was coming down the river, those of us like myself who've been for 20 years plus screaming from the rooftops and banging the drums on conspiracy. We knew it was coming. I knew it was coming up until 2019. In June of 2019, I convened the World Health Sovereignty Summit in Indonesia, calling out what was about to happen. I had Del Bigtree and all the top guns on vaccines there in Indonesia at my base in Bali. And that following week, we held the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into the weaponization of the biosphere. And I had about 30 or 40 of the world's top frontline researchers, medical scientists, activists, doctors, screaming about the weaponization of the biosphere, that was the grave threat, the existential crisis facing humanity. And that was 20 weeks before the Wuhan outbreak. So I knew I was prescient enough to be able to convene judicial inquiries and world sovereignty summits and make a hell of a lot of noise before it happened, because I sensed it was happening. I just didn't know it was going to come in the form that it did. I thought it would be biological warfare. Weaponization of the biosphere has been going on for millennia. If you go back to the galactic wars, which inform our Bible, incidentally. And, if we talk about the depleted uranium subsequent to the rocket testing and the thousands and tens of thousands of atom bombs and nuclear bombs that have really been unleashed in the last 75, 85 years. The entire atmosphere is weaponized. And then you've got 3/4 of a century, courtesy of the Rockefellers, you've got the systemic poisoning of the water and the soil and glyphosates in the food. And so it goes on. Everything is genetically modified and mutated now unrecognizably at the level of the genetics, gene expression. So that's the confluence of the devil. It's been taking place systemically, slowly getting into our bodies. And this business of the forced graphene oxide, in order to force the antenna system to be able to receive information, which will be beamed into us through the ethers, using ultimately the 5G superstructure and the 80,000 satellites, however many there are now. So this entire Borg-like complex that is unfurling around the earth with trillions of dollars worth of satanic infrastructure to do what and why? And did you or I ever get consulted on this? Were our parents or grandparents ever consulted? I don't think so. No, we are the sacrificial harvest until we choose otherwise. And that's the beneficence and the benediction of what's happening right now, Chris, is that this is the point at which we resurrect self. We do take it upon ourselves, which is what the Master Jesus was appealing to 2,000 years ago, was to take ownership as a son or a daughter of God. Step into that, become throned and crowned on your throne as a son or a daughter of God. Yeah. That is not heresy. That is taking ownership. That is taking conscious sovereignty over your temple. And then the greater temple of humanity, which is, of course, the church.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been very interesting to see the past 2 years of how effective the voice of fear can be to convince people to do these things. And I mean, if we're going to use, biblical images of, like the antithesis of fear is obviously peace. The antithesis of fear is love. And the idea, and that's one of the biggest things that I feel like I've learned in my journey of, trying to be able to learn how to hear God's voice, is he never speaks out of fear. It's always out of peace, and that was one of the biggest things I feel like I've learned in the past, couple of years. I'd say probably past like five years, was peace led me on this journey too. In this past 2 years, is peace led me to what's happening with this vaccine. I'm like, well, I'm not going to get it. And there was peace that was like, yeah, don't do that. It was peace that led us in this journey. It was the voice of God, source, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
And it's been so interesting to see how many people react with fear. And it's just like, and even in scriptures, we're told that fear is the voice of the devil, and it's going to trick you.
Yes.
Every single time. And that's what we're seeing on a mass scale worldwide. And
let's look at economics momentarily, Chris, because economics is predicated on the idea of scarcity. So I've been waging war against economics for 20 years because the entire framework of economy and economics is so perverse. We have to dispense with it entirely because it's all predicated on scarcity. Scarcity economics is the source code of fear, of seeding fear into the hearts and minds of billions of souls, because we're running out of shit all the time, right? And we might not make it through the next day. That thinking is integral to evil to prevail and to proliferate on this world, on the checkerboard of the kingdom of the devil, which is the one that we're departing now, but still pretty much caught up in. But yes, you're absolutely right. And what you were describing to me earlier about your own journey, I would say it wasn't so much peace as it was the absence of fear that was you were carrying forward that flame of the absence of fear. I don't know what peace is, mate. I've never known it for one day in this world. So to me, this is an idea. But the absence of fear, I understand. And that I salute you for. And that I agree entirely. Absence of fear becomes the signature and the hallmark of regenesis of species.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's just been so interesting because it's like, which makes me so curious of how, so many so-called Christians or spiritual people haven't been able to recognize the voice of fear. Oh, wait just a second. Something just popped on my screen. They haven't been able to recognize the voice of fear. And it's like, the voice of fear is the number one indicator of a demonic presence in your life, in the world. And it's basic as looking at, all right, what is the media constantly preaching to us? What is every news source constantly preaching to us? Is it truth or is it constant fear?
Principally, it's the pornographicization of reality and the over-sexualization of reality on the one hand, and I'll explain why that is to good Christians. On the one hand, it's that. On the other hand, it's promoting and spreading the notion of dilemma, of chaos, of havoc, of existential threats. Terrorism or asteroid strikes or alien invasion or whatever can be conjured up. So promulgating this idea of terror and dread is integral. And the other side of it is the pornographicization and over-sexualization of reality, which both those things appeal to the perverse human or to the perversified human, to the human that is caught in this flux of perversity. Because the sexualization aspect keeps us feeling adrenalized and alive, so stimulated. Whether you're talking Walt Disney cartoons, which are highly sexualized, or you're talking about billboards or hardcore pornography on the internet, or the way in which beauty pageants and sports are even represented in a sexualized way, from gymnastics to football and wrestling. It's all pornographicized and emphasizes the sexuality aspect. And that's kind of integral to maintaining this constant state of adrenalized, flux, psycho-emotional, psychosexual flux. And that's been going on for a long, in the entire rock and roll industry, my pedigree, and the pop world which is a $250 dream spell machine, is all about sex, all about that, and about how to get it, and how to want it, and how to try for it, and how, you know, and how to aspire to become like. And so that is stimulating the kundalini, so to speak, the life force, the prana, which is the chi, the energy form that comes through the human technology. This is well understood and well known, not just to ancient Ayurvedic masters and Taoist masters in China, but we now realize that the human body, the technology of a human, is a capacitor of light, a capacitor of divine vibral light. And it is that breath of Allah, the compassion, the Muslims would have it, or as that Christed light as the Christians would have it, and as I speak to it in those terms. That vibral light, that kundalini, that constant umbilical that connects you to source whilst you're in your temporal form, is a very, very valuable resource. And that is what the demonic realms are tapping into. That is what the satanic Moderna and Pfizer injections and the CRISPR mitochondrial hacking technology inside these synthetic molecules is seeking to hack into, to be able to create a bypass to steal life force. It may sound outlandish. Trust me, it's even more outlandish than it sounds. It's even more sci-fi than it sounds. But it is the soul hacking, or the attempt to tap into the Christed aspect of us, which is what the demon is constantly trying to do. It's all the demon ever tried to do was to parasite off the goodly human. That's why we talk in terms of sacrifice of innocence, because the more innocent the subject, the more vibral light can be consumed by the demon, or by the draconian, so to speak. And so that's the subtle energetic exchange that's going on. So the average technocrat or bureaucrat who is screwing over his fellow men in the course of his daily grind as a ticket master, or as a, you know, whatever, a policeman, or a what, generally speaking, those who wear costumes to work, okay, generally speaking. And some of them are bloody good folks, we all know that, but in the main they're not. And that much I'm old and wise enough to know. The average person who signs up for a career in a fucking costume or hiding behind a badge of office is not a fully paid up human being, in the main. But that becomes a breeding ground for demonism. Because the intervention of the demonic, or the egregore, the lower elemental realms, tends to prefer people who are obedient to a false-like authority. So technocrats who swear oaths to an ideal, but step outside of their own conscience. Soldiers who sign up their lives to the fucking government and the crown or the state and surrender their sovereignty, abnegate their Christed conscious sovereignty. That is a satanic ritual right there. Conscription is a satanic ritual. To invite any blessed young soul to offer up their sovereignty for king and country is a satanic ritual. It's Saturnian logic, satanic. It's Luciferic. It's false light adherence, false light worship, which is idolatry. It all comes back to the same language. So that, unfortunately, is what the bureaucracy and the technocracy of our world is made up of. Demonism. By distinction, that's what it is. And that creature is the thing that is bludgeoning humanity into extinction. It is fleecing us, racketeering, profiteering, privateering over us, securitizing every aspect of our lives and our blood and our bones, profiteering off all of our woes, penalizing us all the way through our lives, flipping us into birth bonds and treasury bonds and certifications and registrations. All of that is pure satanic logic. It is the harvest of humanity and the harvest of our life force through the machinations, the apparatus, the superstructure of government, bureaucracy, whether it's municipal or federal, or multilateral, doesn't matter. It is time now for all humans, true Christed humans, to step outside of that kingdom of the devil and to do it consciously. And this requires some hard medicine, because a great many of you sanctimonious morons calling yourselves good Christians or Muslims or Buddhists or Hindus are in the thrall of the kingdom of the devil. You are owned lock, stock, and barrel. Your career is owned. Your mortgage is a testament to it. You know, the fact that you send your kids to the public health administration to roll up sleeves is a testament to the fact. Your confounded ignorance and your confounded addiction and adherence to idolatry of billboards and CNN is testament to that fact. The hard medicine is for the good Christed human to see that in one blessed moment in their own lives, and to say, nay, get thee behind me, Satan. I will now reclaim my life. I will reclaim my children from this Molochite, Canaanite, ritualistic bullshit. And I'm going to now define a goodly, godly, Christed life worth living. And I'm going to participate now in anchoring patterns of perfection into this world and building the kingdom of heaven on earth.